Good morning again, everyone. A few weeks ago, I shared my testimony of the first 20 years of serving Him. I shared my story of the beatings and abuse of my stepfather. At the age of 9, I was led to the Lord by an Adventist lady in my neighborhood. I still remember her name, Mrs. Strand. I soon committed my life to serving Him, although there were times when I didn't know if I would live another day. The beatings were so bad. And I mentioned that one time my stepfather had a gun and had it on the table. And he told us that he was going to kill all of us. So we were sat all day long. We were shivering and afraid to move because we thought for sure that was going to be our last day on earth. Despite that, I had a loving mother and a wonderful family. After the death of my stepfather, he committed suicide. My mom married again, and we were a family of 9 children. I was the oldest. You know my brother Tom, although we haven't seen much of him. And my sister Diane is here today. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but she's my favorite sister. Shortly after my 18th birthday, I married Joe Bass, and at the age of 20, we founded Underground Evangelism in 1960. This was a ministry to the persecuted in the Soviet Union. We smuggled millions of Bibles and Christian literature. We helped thousands of families whose husbands were in prison. We also sent radio broadcasts and provided support to pastors. We also worked in China. It was very hard work, but the organization grew to a worldwide ministry. I became ill and was exhausted, so I decided to just stay home and be with my 3 sons. Elijah had just come from a tremendous victory where the prophets of Baal were defeated. Jezebel was furious and sent troops to kill him. Elijah ran for his life. I don't have the clicker. Thank you. Which one? Is it this one? This one? Yeah, okay. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my father." Just like Elijah, I thought, it's enough now. I've served you for 20 years. I'm tired. Have any of you thought that thought sometime when you get discouraged and you're working so hard? I was sure that I could just retire and be with my 3 sons and the ministry would continue. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I was working on some crafts, and the Lord spoke to me and reminded me of my commitment to serve Him all my life. And so it was when they had crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you?" Elijah said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." So like Elisha, I prayed, "If I'm going to serve you 20 more years, May these years be twice as much blessing as the first 20. You will have to open the door and lead me to the ministry you want me to. In 1978, 1 million Portuguese people fled from the former colonies in Africa because the communists had taken over. The government didn't know what to do with what was 10% of the population, so they ended up in camps or abandoned buildings all over Portugal. In 1981, we had a couple who were working with the refugees. They appealed to us for help. 2 weeks later, the Lord answered me. I was in Portugal to help the refugees from Angola and Mozambique. Joe asked me if I would like to head up the ministry in Portugal. So this was like a miracle to me because I never expected to be there. My task was to organize emergency aid to the thousands. We started helping 30 each month with a food parcel and clothing for the children. We soon had to find a place to store them. I worked in Portugal for 5 years, and at the end of that time, we were feeding 17,000 families every month. We had a staff of 246 Portuguese, and we purchased land that was formerly a large restaurant with large storage facilities. We had to find, no, that was the wrong one. We were also concerned about the spiritual help. So we had teams of Bible students to go to the camps and do evangelism. The local churches welcomed the new converts. Still, the need was overwhelming. At times, especially in the beginning, I was overwhelmed with the need. I can remember one time I went back to the hotel because we didn't have a place at that time, and I was crying. Oh, Lord, this is just too big a job. I just can't do this. I just cried, and then the Lord said, anybody can cry. And I shed many tears, but the Lord reminded me that even 1 cup of water in His name would be blessed. So when we started with 30, suddenly we ended up with 17,000. This is the way God works. Some of the stories brought me to tears. Let me tell you about these 2 children. One day I received a call that there were 3 children locked up in a box. The mother was a prostitute and would lock them up when she was away. The neighbors would poke bread through the holes. This is Luis Miguel, who was 6, and his sister Sophia, who was 4. Their brother Carlos was 6 months old. When we first saw them, they wore rags. Sophia's face was bloody and bruised, and they all were covered with lice and bites from rats. So we had to find this is like the box that he was in. It was just a big packing box. We had to find a more permanent solution, especially for the children. They were not the only children who were abandoned, abused, or orphaned. The land that we bought had 10 acres, so I prayed, what can we do for all these children? The Lord gave me a vision to build an orphanage for these children. This became the solution, a whole village for children. And this is a drawing of the children's village. In a very short time, we created a home for 200 children. We built 7 two-story houses. Each house had room for 24 children with a tia and tio, aunt and uncle. Each house had a small kitchen and living room, plus the bedrooms. There are never any accidents with God. I wondered what we were going to do with the restaurant that came with the land we bought. But now all the children could come together to eat their evening meal, as well as meet for Bibles, study, and prayer. We named each house after the fruits of the Spirit: house of love, joy, peace, goodness, faith, kindness, and patience. I went back to the children in the box and told the mother that we had a home for children, and if she would like, we would take the children there, where they would be loved and cared for. She said, "Take them. I will not live long." She had venereal disease, and she died a few months later. Luis Miguel became my favorite. And we made sure that the distribution of goods continued in the camps. But the refugees needed more than goods. We had to help them with medical aid as well. So we had a medical team that made regular visits to the camps. We had a small medical center at the village, and our doctors went into the camps to work as well. 50% of the children suffered from upper respiratory disease and tuberculosis. Many were malnourished. And let me tell you about her. This little girl was starving and had lost her will to live. With our doctor's help, they were able to save her. We had another little girl whose name was Maria. Her mother was retarded and treated her baby like a doll. She was 6 months old when we got her, and she had lost her will to live. She only weighed 18 pounds. Our doctor wrapped her, and all of us took turns holding her for 24 hours a day. And we would have a spoon, and we'd feed her every 2 hours. And after a while, she recovered and was a joy to all of us. She was a little slow, but she wasn't retarded. For these children and thousands more, we created a happy ending. We gave them love, a home, and we even baked cookies together. I got this letter from one of the houses. And this is the letter here. I got letters from all the homes and many other letters. I have a big box of letters from the children. But I'll read you this one letter. This is the House of Peace. We are the children from the House of Peace. We hope that you are in good health. We are all fine, thank God. Congratulations for the birth of your first grandson. We have seen his pictures, and he's very cute and big. Tia and Tio Bass, thank you so much for having started this village here in Portugal. If you had not, we would have all been living in misery. Thank you once again for having us. With love and patience, Tia Ingracia has been helping us very much each day. We always do our chores, we type, cook. Thank you for everything you have done for us. We miss you very much. When are you coming to visit us? We are here waiting for you. We wish you a lot of happiness and blessings from our Lord Jesus, your children who will never forget you. Thank you so much for giving us Tia Ingracia as our director. During those 5 years, I would spend 6 weeks in Portugal, and then I would go home for 6 weeks, and then I was back 6 weeks. So the kids always looked forward to me coming, and I always looked forward to going. So after 5 years, I said goodbye to Portugal. Portugal joined the EU, and many of the refugees were able to go back to Africa, and in Portugal, the conditions improved. All the children in the orphanage were adopted, all of them, including Luis Miguel, Sophia, and Carlos. A Dutch family adopted all three of them. Shortly after I left Portugal, the Soviet Empire collapsed. I was called first to Romania and later to the Ukraine, Moldova, and Bulgaria. This is Nicolae Ceausescu, the director of Romania. 2 weeks after his execution, I was in the newly freed country. It broke my heart. This is what I found. During the reign of Ceausescu, he insisted that every woman have 5 children as a minimum. He didn't care that this would end up with 50,000 children in orphanages in Romania. He wanted to raise an army loyal to him. Many of the children had been taken away from Christian parents because during the communist reign, if you raised your child and you were caught, your children were taken away from you. So many of the children in the orphanage were from Christian mothers and fathers. Many died in childbirth, and many just couldn't feed their children. Literally tens of thousands of neglected children languished in orphanages everywhere in the country. I was there before 2020 came and exposed the conditions. We would go into the orphanages, and sometimes the kids were strapped in the beds because the staff didn't want to be bothered with them. If you try to pick up a child, like that picture you saw, their hands would go up in the air because they were afraid. They were unloved and uncared for. Some orphanages were better than others, but all of them lacked love, touching, and being able to go outside. If a child had Down syndrome or any other big physical problems, they were sent to what was called the irrecoupable house, where they lived for the rest of their lives in indescribable conditions. When I was there, I asked this person who was in charge to take me to one of these irrecoupable houses. And he said, "No, Senor, you don't want to go there. This is too terrible a place." I said, "Oh, I do want to go there. I want to see." And when I went in that home, there were children naked, there was adults, there were cripples, they were just laying in beds because the government just said, these people, there's nothing that can be done for them, so they're just going to live their life here and we'll just forget about it. It just was really terrible. My organization set up a large sponsorship program in the orphanages. In addition, we started distributing goods to desperate families. Romania requested help from our organization. I said, we're a Christian organization. And they knew we could provide help, and they wanted our help. So we met with the top people responsible for the orphanage. My conditions were that we could distribute all the help ourselves. We didn't trust the government to do it. So we had our own trucks coming in to bring the help for the kids. And the second thing was we had teams from the different churches go into the orphanage to work and teach Christian values. That's what we called it, Christian values. And they lacked Christian values after communism. So they agreed. And we had a lot of teams that went from the churches who taught the children every single Saturday. Some of them took the kids home, and it was really great. Many were sick in body and in spirit. We played with the children, and we even had summer camps where for the first time children were free to play sports, have plenty of good food, as well as continue to hear about Jesus. And despite all the obstacles, we tried our best to create happy smiles. Not only in Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, the Iron Curtain came down. In Albania, the communist dictator Enver Hoxha got toppled. Enver Hoxha hated Christians. His goal in life was to make Albania the most perfect atheistic state. Can you imagine such a goal? He killed over 300,000 Christians. For over 40 years, Enver Hoxha had ruled the country. This is what he left behind: the poorest nation in all of Europe. Albania was the last communist state to fall. Because it was such a poor country, gangs looted everywhere, including health centers and hospitals. This is the bathroom in one of the health centers. The medical services were especially neglected. I was in one hospital where the windows were out, dogs were in the hallways, and people were covering themselves with their own blankets if they had one. This is how the needles were sterilized. We had to do something. Durrës was the second largest city, so we decided to help, and we did. We built 2 health centers and 1 emergency medical clinic. The Durrës Emergency Hospital was destroyed in a flood. Patients had to drive an hour and a half to get to Tirana. Many died. With God's timing, we received a call in Amsterdam that they had just purchased a ship from Donald Trump. That was one of the times when he was needing money and he was kind of bankrupt, so he sold this ship that he had. And he was a little paranoid about his health, and he had a full emergency hospital on the ship. So the people that bought the ship didn't want the hospital. They were, I guess, going to put a casino there or something. So they called us in our office in Amsterdam and asked us if we would like it. And we said yes. And it just happened that it was just after we heard about this emergency hospital. Isn't God good? Immediately, we launched a campaign in Holland for hospital beds, sheets, and all what we would need to take to Albania. We had 2 large trucks that drove all the way to Durrës from Albania. The government provided a building, and we were able to provide the emergency hospital. We also built 2 health centers that had maternity rooms. The infant mortality rate was very high. Immediately, death in childbed went down dramatically. This little one is the first baby born in our first health center. A happy moment, not only for the mother and her child, but for the doctor and me as well. In addition to the health clinics, we built an optical center. I met with a girl who was 23 years old and was blind. She said, "When you are blind here, you are dead." A group of blind people approached us and asked us for a doctor to come and see if they were blind or not. And I thought, blind or not? You don't know if you're blind? But they didn't know because they'd never been to a doctor to see. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go ask my ophthalmologist if he'll come with me to Albania. I'm not afraid to ask for anything. And he said, oh, I can't go, but I think one of my associates can go. Now, this doctor was very tall. He was he was almost 7 feet tall. Very tall. And the people in Albania are very short. But he said, I'm going to come with you. He not only came with me once, he came with me twice. And the first time, he set up a center in our building and with a microscope, and he had me looking in the microscope, and he says, Lois, have you ever seen a cataract? And I said, no. He says, look at this. It was the largest cataract he had ever seen. And the things he saw in Albania were things he'd only read about in school. So what he did is he came and did examine the patients, and then he came back, and in 1 week, he did 45 surgeries. Yeah. We built an optical center with facilities, and local ophthalmologists could use it. With the help of our friends and supporters in the U.S. and other places, we had a splendid selection to offer. I cannot emphasize it enough. Thanks to the generosity of our donors, I could continue. We worked hard in Romania, in Moldova, Ukraine, Albania, Bulgaria. I even went to Siberia, long ways. And we helped wherever we could in cases of emergencies. This is one of several trucks filled to the brim with emergency aid after a devastating earthquake in Armenia. Many years later, just before I returned to Albania, a war raged and refugees poured into the country. I made new friends. In these last 20 years of service, God indeed answered my request for a double blessing of His Spirit. This old lady was one of the refugees who fled from Macedonia into Albania. She didn't know where her son was and was confused and lost. So many people in the world confused and lost. So in conclusion, I'm grateful to the Lord for answering my request for a double blessing. I'm also grateful to my wonderful family and friends. One of my best friends is here today, Bernie. I am blessed to worship with you in this loving church. Even though I'm retired, I'm 84 years old. As long as I have breath, I will serve Him. As long as I have legs to stand and arms to use, I will use them for Him. I encourage you to use the gifts that God has given you, because He's given each of us gifts, and we need each other. We need each other. There's no one better than anyone else, because without all of us together to do things together with the gifts God has given us, it doesn't matter that we're a small church. We can still do great things for God. Just look what happened last week. And just think what's going to happen in the days to come. We have a very bad time coming. And we need to use every single day, every day, to talk to people about the Lord, to bring people in, because the days are very short. So in conclusion, I would like to just have a prayer for you, that the Lord will show you what gift He's given you and encourage you to use that gift for Him. Father in heaven, I'm so grateful to you for taking my life and making it a blessing to others. I pray that I will continue to have strength to be able to serve you. I pray for each and every single one here today, that you will show them what you would have them to do in the little bit of time we have left. I ask you to give them a double portion of your Spirit so that we together can serve you in your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.